Hi, what's up, guys? Welcome back to part 3? Thank you for joining me. I had a bit of trouble getting my camera to work, so you'll have to watch without my mug on my face, unfortunately. But we're at a pretty good stage with this edit. I'm quite excited about where we are. We've got a pretty strong edit. This is our timeline here. We're on version 4 and we have a strong intro. We've got B-roll covering the whole thing, and we've got a pretty strong narrative running through here. We're running at 1 minute 21. I asked some of you to give me feedback on this edit so that I can implement it, and some of you have done that. So let's pop over to the comments. So here's the video here, and we've got a comment saying there's an audio pop at 33 seconds. I did actually notice that myself. So we'll look into that. And one incredibly embarrassing thing, which is I was way off with. So Sonny Boo has said that actually when we talk about the Ugnaught is not Baby Yoda. Now, I'm sorry to the Star Wars fans out there. I really am. I obviously don't know enough, and I assumed wrongly, as he was talking about the plot of the film, that the Ugnaught referred to Baby Yoda. I thought that was the name of the species that Baby Yoda was, but no, I was drastically wrong. So let's watch it back, and you'll understand what he's saying when he says that, and then we can see what might be the best place to go with this.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
And his job is hunting down beings and turning them in. The pilot slowly chips away at that idea, especially when he meets the Ugnaught. This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
So not bad shape. I've got these guys at the end. Can't remember why I got them there. They look alright. Okay, so before we crack on, let's duplicate this sequence, and so that we're not fucking about with the other one. Right, okay. So now we've watched that back, we can see where my mistake was about introducing the Ugnaught, which changes the Mandalorian's path. Now, those who have watched from the beginning know that we wanted to cover a few things with this edit. We wanted to incorporate the storyline of the Mandalorian. We wanted to show that it was an internal journey. What started out as an external journey ended up being an internal journey. We had that, only it references the wrong catalyst for that internal journey. The catalyst for that internal journey is Baby Yoda, which I mistakenly thought was called an Ugnaught, so shame on me. Another thing that we wanted to cover was something for the fans, and then to say that this series is like nothing ever done before. And then we wanted to encourage people to watch the series afterwards. So we've got all of those bases covered. The stuff for the fans is where we talk about the old Star Wars and how far it's come, and that also brings us nicely onto how this is like nothing else ever done before. So I'm going to go dive straight in and fix this major issue with Baby Yoda slash Ugnaught. So I remember that we heard a soundbite from this lady here, the director, and she says about about him having an internal journey, or his journey changes when he meets Baby Yoda, right? So we need to go and find that soundbite from her. Yeah, I got rid of all of the clips from before, so I'm going to go back in time, look at some old sequences, see if I can find that clip. I had a lot of trouble, for those who watched it might remember, I had a lot of trouble early in the edit trying to figure out if what she said was better than what he said. Dave, he basically says everything changes when he meets the Ugnaught. She says, I'm not sure of her name, so apologies. She says everything changes when he meets Baby Yoda. Now, we don't have much footage of the Ugnaught, and I think it's stronger to say about Baby Yoda, especially because we're trying to hit something for the fans, right? And the fans love Baby Yoda. So I think it's a better idea to keep her soundbite and put it in rather than have Dave's soundbite that's currently in the edit and throw some Ugnaught footage over the top. So I think this might be it. Let's have a look.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life sort of upended by the introduction of the baby.
That's the soundbite we want. So how the hell are we going to put this in? The trouble is that we're going to find is that we're going to get really short soundbite from Dave.
Flawed, mysterious, loner.
And his job is hunting down beings and turning them in. The pilot slowly chips away at that idea, especially when he meets the Ugnaught.
So instead, what can we say?
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life sort of upended by the introduction of the baby.
Now first I'm going to get rid of that fumble.
Ended by the introduction.
Let me get on my keys so you guys can see what keys I'm pushing.
Has that way of life sort of upended by the introduction
I'm cutting on the T of both times she says introduction, because it should give us that sharp sound. It should give us a nice transition between the two.
By the introduction of the baby. By the introduction of the baby.
Can't even hear the T there, so let's slip it one frame.
By the introduction of the baby.
There we go.
By the introduction of the baby.
So, anything else we can cut from this soundbite?
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life sort of upended by the introduction of the baby. Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life sort of upended. Has that way of life sort of upended.
Let's see if we can get rid of sort of.
Has that way of life sort of. that way of life upended by the way of life upended.
Okay, yeah, that gives us a more natural pause between those words. I'm going to try and fade out her last letter.
Has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby?
Much better.
Has that way of life upended?
Of course, we're going to cover this with B-roll, so we're not going to see her blink.
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby? Who's been following a way of life?
Get rid of that. Do you know what I want to get rid of that but I'm going to see how she fits in the edit first, because we might, if I take out too much, we might not have a chance to even see her face.
Cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
And his job is hunting down beings and turning them in. The pilot slowly chips away at that idea, especially when he meets the Ugnaught.
So, well, we don't want that, but I'm just going to throw it to the end for now. Let's shift everything across. I think in an ideal world we'd have let's see if they both work, having Dave and the director both saying their little bits. The thing is, if we got Dave just saying a short amount here, then we're going to have to cut between the two. Might not feel particularly smooth, but let's see what we got.
Odd, mysterious loner.
And his job is hunting down beings and turning them in.
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby?
Let's get rid of that breath at the end.
Of the baby.
So I don't think we're going to be able to have both Dave and the director in. It doesn't really flow very well.
And his job is hunting down beings and turning them in.
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby?
So let's try it without Dave.
Or iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby?
That works. That works. I think... yeah, I don't think we're going to get anything better from this. The only way it could be better...
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way...
is if the director says something a bit more rounded about what he does in terms of the fact that he's a bounty hunter. So I'm going to go back into the footage and see what else she says surrounding that subject.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life sort of upended by the introduction of the baby. And it sort of changes his life, and I think he's reevaluating his priorities and what means something to him in his life in the world. So I think it's really sort of about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known until he met the child.
Does that give us anything more? I don't think it does. I wish it'd say something other than a man. Sounds so generic and uninspiring.
This loner.
Who's been following a way of life, and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
The timings work really well as well for the music. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that because the pictures here
who's been following a way of life.
kind of depict what his way of life is when we show those shots over her saying that. Just got to try and figure out when we see her face.
Mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended. Who's been following a way of...
I'm going to make that shot touch shorter and then slip this so that we come in on some action.
a way of life and has that way of life.
And then let's try and come in here to cover up that cut.
Way of life upended.
She blinks. So let's come in here.
Has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little
It's not quite as good as it was before. It's a shame. But now we've got Dave's voice, and we haven't seen him yet, so we need to show him. I'm going to make sure that this works well first.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
this little
Flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and following a way of life and has that way of life upended.
Let's get rid of that
Following a way of life, a way of life, following a way of life and a way of life, a way of life.
Sounds better. So now I'm trying to play with the timing of what she says so that it plays better with what we got here, because the music is perfectly timed to itself. We can only work at so many beats per minute with the music, and because it's only out by, you know, a small fraction, it's not worth playing about with the music, but rather retiming what we have to work with the music. So I'm going to try and do that now.
Loner.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
And what I want is for her to say introduction of the baby later.
By the introduction of the baby.
this little being is suddenly help.
Well, actually, do you know what? I think what might be a better idea, and let me just watch this back again.
Life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly help.
If we have more of this shot, this is a really nice shot, and I think... No, that's all we got. Okay. I think it might be worth just bringing all of this in later, if we have the footage.
Of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him
The show.
and then challenging him.
The show to me.
I think we should see Dave here.
And then challenging him.
The show.
Challenging him.
The show.
Maybe not. I don't like his look at where he... I know I can cut just before, but
challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic.
I'm going to see if I can move some stuff around so it flows a bit better.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then
So we don't really see the being here.
this little being is suddenly.
I know that Dave is actually talking about, when he says this, he's talking about the Ugnaught, but it really works in this context. I don't think there's anything wrong with using it out of the original context.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then
I think I want to see Dave's face when he says helping him.
suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic. Is that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby?
This little.
Is there any more footage on this shot that we can extend it by? No.
By the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline.
Okay. So, let's move this music and then start shuffling things, because this music doesn't come in at the right point. So,
Ended by the introduction of the baby.
This little.
everything needs to be slipped a bit. So, let's do that.
Introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly.
Maybe a touch more.
Way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him. Being is suddenly helping him and then this little being is suddenly helping him.
Let's see what Dave says here. I like the timings of the music now, the two tracks flowing into each other.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then
Maybe?
this little being is suddenly helping him.
Doesn't look very interested, does it?
Is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
I think it might actually be best to show him saying challenging him.
And then being is suddenly helping him. Being is suddenly.
So, let's slip all of this, get rid of that.
Little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him. Helping him. And
Life upended by the introduction of the baby.
this little being is suddenly helping.
Yeah, let's try bringing it back in and then slipping all of this over here.
Baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
Yeah, it's a bit too jumpy there now. But let me see if the timing works well for him. I know I'm going to have to chop him out there, because he is bored as fuck. So,
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the
let's see if the two of these work back to back.
and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline.
Yeah.
The show to
This little being is suddenly helping him, and then
I think we can have a little gap between these two phrases here from Dave.
this little being is suddenly helping him.
Feels rushed. Let's give it a bit of space.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
Not that much.
This little being is suddenly helping him. This little being is suddenly helping him, and then challenging him. And then challenging him.
the show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about
And then what I'm going to do is bring her B-roll forward.
Challenging him.
the show to me in the most basic storyline
Can we have some more of that shot?
to me in the most basic storyline is
Yes. But look like we had a flash frame there. Yeah, black.
Him.
the show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never.
So we're getting there. Starting to flow. While I'm here, I'm going to address the pop that we have here. Who is it that pointed that out? Jeremiah Mack. So,
the show to me in the most the show
quite frustrating because it doesn't really show. So, let's keyframe the audio levels. See if this works.
the show to me the show to me in
Got rid of the pop,
the show to me
but let's just smooth it out a bit.
the show to me in the show to me the show to me the show to me in
I think that works. Let's watch it back in context and see how everything flows. Let me go back to here.
Technically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him, and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And
So it flows well. There was a couple of issues. One I noticed with the music. I'll look into that. And these shots are too quick as well. These ones here. So let's address the shots.
Has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping
These
him.
ones here.
By the introduction of the baby.
This little being.
Now ideally we'd hold on this shot a bit more. So let's see if there's anything else. A few frames. Just bring them in.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
Still feels rushed. Maybe this is a better shot. Let me see if there's more frames. Yes. Plenty. So maybe this should replace this shot. Open that up, extend it a bit. How far can we get here?
This little being is suddenly helping him.
And does this shot extend? If we can get some longer shots, I think it's going to, this whole section is going to feel nicer. Rather than loads of rushed shots. Yeah, it looks like we've got enough footage, so we can just use 2 shots there. Let's have a look.
This little being is suddenly helping him. And this little being is suddenly helping him. And then
Can we extend that? Be great if we can. Yep. Let's go all the way out there.
and then challenging him.
The show.
Great, because he looked like he was burping.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show.
It'd be great if this was a shot that showed him and Baby Yoda helping him more. I don't know if you've seen the series, but there are quite a few shots where Yoda is helping the Mandalorian. So
This little being is suddenly helping him.
but unfortunately we don't have those same shots in the footage that we've got. So let's see if there is anything where it looks like Baby Yoda is helping. I don't think we have anything. Certainly nothing that's not already in there. No. Okay.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
I don't want to put this shot first because it kind of takes us out of the moment a bit. Because we can see that, you know, the little guy behind the scenes, we can see he's fake. I don't know, and there's something about these cinematic scenes that make him feel real. So I don't really want to pull us out of that by pulling this forward.
That way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
Maybe there's a way of shoving these down. Don't know what happens either side of this. Oh, there you go.
Little being is suddenly helping.
Okay, so how can I tackle this?
Introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
Maybe this will work.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
Quite possibly.
This little being is suddenly
Maybe I go back on my stimulant. I mean, we don't really have a lot to work with. The only other shot I can use is one of the ones that we had at the end here. This one where he's gobbling up what I can only imagine is a delicious meal. Let's throw it in and see if it works.
This little being is suddenly
Is there any more footage? No, that's all we got. Okay. Maybe that will slide.
Baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him. And then
So short. I'm going to see if I can slow it down a touch.
By the introduction of the baby.
this little being
Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to slow down this shot because it's quite nice. Now, what I tend to do is I don't tend to slow it any more than 85. So let's see if this will work.
this little
It does work. I think I might be able to push it to 85.
this little
Looks a bit jerky. Maybe I can change the frame blending to help.
Baby.
this little
Yeah, that helps a bit better.
Baby.
Just going to slide it one frame so we get rid of that flash at the front.
this little
And at the end. And I think that's as much as we're going to get out of that shot. If we squeeze it any further, then it's going to look jerky.
That way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
this little
And I was going to slow this shot
The
back
baby.
because we've got the embers flying around. It's going to look terrible. Anything with tiny details slowed down
Introduction of the baby.
is going to look terrible.
this little being is suddenly helping him. This little being is suddenly
I think, yeah, this little being, I think that's a good shot for this little being.
this little being is suddenly
And then hopefully this shot makes sense. And then I might be able to slide this over and get rid of the behind the scenes shot altogether.
this little being is suddenly helping him. And then
This shot needs to be longer. It's already, there's not a lot going on. So I'm going to slow it down. Let's try 85 again. Frame blending. I think I saw a flash frame on this. Yep. Which shot is this? Alright, let's see how that looks.
Upended by the introduction of the baby.
this little being is suddenly helping him. And then suddenly
I think we can get away with slowing this shot down even more. Let's try 75.
being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
I think this is starting to work, you know? Right. Let's watch this little section back.
And has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he...
Yeah, it works. And now I think these two talk too closely together.
Challenging him.
The show, to me...
I'm going to shift this over and this as well. See if this helps. Give it a bit of breathing space.
Being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
Yeah, that works.
Is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realize.
Okay. Let's watch the whole thing back. See where we're at. I think... Not sure if there's a music.
Has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him.
I think what I misheard earlier was this, the music on this is like a really high instrument, high-pitched instrument that comes in, which sounds like, I thought it was an edit point.
This
But it's not.
little
Yeah, I thought it was two shots cut together and I forgot to blend the audio channels or something. But oh, we're all good. Okay, let's go from the top and see where we are.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Okay, there was one bit which stood out. This guy, he stumbles his words.
Star.
So let's find that.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was.
Actually, those two don't flow together very well. Let's see if I can separate them a bit.
That armor off.
I think Star Wars
Terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking.
That's better, but the audio needs to be tapered out slightly.
Part of people's lives.
It was
It's not quite working.
Lives.
it was
Better.
Such a part of people's lives.
it was beyond
Such a part of people's lives.
it was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time,
Okay, so that's the stumble.
not only what it was at the not only what it was at the
Okay, that's working. Put in those.
phenomenal, not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has. This new technology.
I want this shot to be a bit longer, so I'm going to see if I can slow this down.
Back where it has been and where it should.
But I don't want to add any more time, so to where this cut point is.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has.
So I'm going to chop this, move it along. We can cut a bit off the front here, I don't mind. Slow this down. Let's try 75, see how we go.
This new technology
Works fine.
This new technology.
Let's see if we can do it even more.
This new technology brings. This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been. Back where it has been.
Looking better.
This new.
I think let's just shift this a touch.
Has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
I wonder if I can slow down that shot as well. Feels a bit quick compared to the rest.
Should be.
$85 probably.
Should be.
Fuck it, let's try 75.
Where it should be. Where it should be.
Starting to jerk now. Okay.
Where it should be. Looking back where it should be.
Now I had some people saying last week that they wished this shot was longer. So what we can do is take a still frame of that after the spaceship disappears, like there. And what's the best way of doing this? I wonder if we can blend them and it feels natural. Not too bad. I think because we're going to have titles over the end of this, probably with a website or something, some sort of call to action. So hopefully you won't notice the transition to a still that much. Let's watch it back. Full screen.
Where it should be.
Does stand out. So we're going to really milk this. So these stars are spinning. So what I'm going to try and do is carry on spinning, the stars spinning at the same speed. Rotation. And I'm going to try and have it smoothly stop. So this is going to be a bit of a guessing game, really. Pretty sure it's that way. Ease in so that we come to a nice smooth stop. Almost. The rotation in the actual shot is a bit faster. Which means this number needs to be higher. Let's try again. That feels pretty natural. Now to deal with the wonkiness in these corners. Only way I can really think of doing that is scaling. Scaling this up, and then we can add some black bars top and bottom. But it might make it feel a bit shit. Don't know till we try. I'm going to have to play with the position as well, so maybe not. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, the scale feels weird. So what other options do we have? What I'm thinking is fading. Yeah, what I'm thinking is cutting off the black bars. So the black bars are built into the footage, right? Black bars top and bottom. So I'm going to cut those out so it's not on this footage, and then behind this footage I'm going to scale this same footage up and have the same rotation on it so that it reaches out a bit beyond there, and then blur this edge, and hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's mask this footage. Do you know what? It's going to be so much easier if we just used a crop. Crop the top. I can't see where transparency grid, thank you. Okay, let's jump off. And the bottom. Okay. So now we're going to duplicate this underneath, scale it up, so we're going to get a bit of repetition, and then what we can do with the crop on the top layer, give it a bit of feather, 10 pixels will do. Actually you can see there's a band of black here where I've added the feather. So I'm going to shrink, crop a bit more, and then bottom as well. And put some black bars top and bottom. Hopefully that will give us what we need. So new folder, I'm going to call it artwork. I normally keep my stills, mats, things like that in there. Create a new folder called mats. Create a color mat. Black. Call it black. And I'm going to throw it over here so that I can figure out where the top and bottom should be. Now, the way I'm going to do it is just so I've got a perfectly straight line. If I used a mask, I might not get it perfectly straight. So what I'm going to do is create a crop, make the top one. So looks like about there. And then duplicate this and create the bottom one. About there. Hopefully now, when I drag this over, should give us some perfect black bars. Right, let's have a look. Looks like it worked. Let's watch it back full screen. Yeah, great, happy days. Now this doesn't feel very smooth to me, so I'm just going to smooth this out a bit the way it comes to a stop. And then do the same to this guy. I'll just copy it. Much better. Cool. Well, that works. What else? Let's go from the top. See what is standing out.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool. I like it. Don't think we need these anymore. I'm going to delete those. Clear my in and out point. I don't know why, but I find in and out points just to be a bit ugly. I don't know. They distract my eyes, and I prefer not having them if I can. Anyone else get that? Right. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to play it back one more time to see if there's any changes we can make in the B-roll. Let's move this down, tidy it up. And then if I'm happy, I'm going to do the music levels. Get the music levels working.
The Mandalorian is your icon.
Something about this sequence that feels a bit jagged. Doesn't feel very smooth.
The Mandalorian.
So this is a sequence that, as it came, you can see this is all one shot.
The Mandalorian is you.
The whole sequence, but it feels very, yeah, it doesn't feel particularly smooth. I don't know if you agree.
The Mandalorian is you. The Mandalorian is you.
I feel like we just need something in between this and this. I think this shot is, because of the size of the gun and the movement, quite cumbersome in its movement. So what I'd quite like, I think, is to have this feels quite elegant. The shot, the angle, this shot and this shot, the way that the area of focus is kind of in the same point. It's easy to have quick cuts like that, and this is in a very similar position as well. So I think this is going to work a lot better.
The Mandalorian.
No reason why we can't have this, but I think we just need something in between this shot and this shot. There is a shot actually in the rushes where he walks into this room, this exact room. That might work. Let's, what's underneath? I've forgotten.
The Mandalorian is your iconic.
Do we have, because after this shot, or is it before? We see the baby. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the opening shot. Okay.
The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is your icon. The Mandalorian is your icon. Iconically.
Let's try. It does work. I'm wondering if this remains here, and this shot is changed. But what I'm going to do is look for the shot where he walks into this room in the rushes, and then see if it's worth taking it. See if it works together. There it is. Okay, plug it in.
The Mandalorian is your iconic.
It's a bit flat, isn't it? We lose the action.
The Mandalorian is your. The Mandalorian is your.
Do you know what? It's not working too badly. This way around, that, and then that. I'm going to get rid of this shot for now.
The Mandalorian is your.
I think there might be, this feels a bit cumbersome. There might be a way for these to flow together. This one
Is your.
this one. This movement here, arm over the shoulder, feels akin to this. So maybe this guy walking in comes first. Let's do that there. And then those two shots back to back should hopefully flow better. Let's try.
The Mandalorian is your.
Much better. So, we didn't need to steal the initial shot of Baby Yoda. Let's shove that down.
The Mandalorian is your icon.
How do we feel about that?
The Mandalorian is your icon.
I think because it's so fast, all of this, I want to hold on this shot a bit more. If we have it, let's have a look. One frame. No, none. I lied. Okay, anything before that? Nothing before that. So it is what it is.
The Mandalorian is your icon.
And because it's got loads of little bits in it, sparks, and it's quite fast paced, I can't really slow that down without it being really noticeable.
The Mandalorian is your iconic.
Forgotten what this shot is. Okay, yeah, that brings the pace down. Let's just get rid of that.
The Mandalorian is your iconically.
It's a shame I can't. What I'd love is any shot really that kind of carries on this explosion. No point in me looking in what I've already got in there, because everything has its place pretty much. But if there is something much like that that is not behind the scenes footage, then that's going to flow really nicely in there. Not that I can see.
Mysterious loner.
Who's been
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool. Mandalorian is your icon.
It's funny, the more you watch it, the more you can't make out really what's going on, but you get a sense of it, more so than it was before. It felt a bit jumbled.
The Mandalorian is your iconic. The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Now, if I'm honest, I think this is the only shot that I'm not that keen on. It's a bit boring, you can't really see what's going on, and they're just shooting the stand-ins. So let's see what else. We want a behind-the-scenes shot. Something that kind of speaks about the technology. Do we have that shot in? We did in an earlier version. Guy using the iPad.
Filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is...
Yeah, I think let's stick it in.
should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be. Where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
I'm going to slip everything a bit earlier, so that, because this shot's a bit boring, I just kind of want everything to be a bit earlier. It's boring, but it's useful. It has good context. I like it in the context of this, especially because we've got a guy using it here.
This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be. Should be. This is
Elongate that.
it should be. This is fantastic.
I'm going to shift his voice as well, ever so slightly, because I like the length of these shots, but the way they cuts on his voice too much, so it jars a bit.
Where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should.
And what I'm going to do is add a little gap in here. So he says, "This is fantastic."
This is fantastic.
Bring him earlier, so there's a bit more of a gap.
It should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Yeah, it gives it more dramatic emphasis now.
Filmmaking back where it should be.
I think we can even afford to shift this a bit later.
Back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
It's better, but this I think is a bit too close to here now, so I'm going to see if I can shove that over. See how it feels now.
Making back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic.
Still no.
Filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Okay, put that there. I'll play with the cut then, because what I really want is the pacing of what he says to convey the message really well, to be more powerful. That's, for me, more important than how long these shots are.
This is should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back.
I think that might be a flash frame. Yep.
This is fantastic. B. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should.
Is there any more on this bit of footage? Yeah, I think let's bring it in.
This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
That feels better.
Where it should be. This is fantastic.
What might help us is getting rid of that pause between his two words, and then I can bring him in later.
Being in where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be. Filmmaking back where it should be. Being in where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
I think that works better.
Filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
All right. Let's watch it back one more time. See if there's anything else that sticks out.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I'm thinking this shot, where it says about the search isn't out there, the search is in here.
Something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there,
I wonder if there's something a bit more literal or a bit more outdoors to put here for this reference. So I'm going to go back into the rushes of the shot and see if there is. Even if it's behind the scenes. Or is behind the scenes actually going to work? I'm not sure. This is pretty, feels like a pretty wide epic shot that we haven't used. Yeah, but it kind of takes it, I think the behind the scenes takes us out of the moment.
About himself that he had never known.
and realizing that the search wasn't out there,
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's got to be in from the series. shot. Now what would actually be good is to use this shot. I know I've already used it.
Is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic.
But we didn't have any other good shots for this section, so yeah. Ah, there is a shot where he is speaking to that Ugnaught. This is pretty cool. He looks like he's searching. Let's drop it in, see how it feels.
On himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out. The search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
That's pretty cool.
Discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there.
And there's a nice shot with the Ugnaught. If I'm not mistaken, where's it gone? That's also pretty cool.
Is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
Yeah, I think this works. I think maybe we just keep this. Let me delete it, duplicate this, sorry. Get rid of that. Tidy up. See if there's anything else that stands out.
Him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool. I'm just reminding myself what I deleted here. Oh yeah. Okay. I'm pretty happy now. So, assuming I've exported this and handed it to the producer and they've gone, yes, that's perfect. Oh, How did you manage it in such a short amount of time? Then we're going to work on the audio. So I'm going to start that now. And first of all, I'm going to look at the dialogue. So for me to do that, just going to mute the music track and change my view. There's audio. Clip. Yeah. So I've got my clip mixer up here and I'm going to go through, keep an eye on the audio levels here and also up here and adjust them as need be. Keep an eye out for any pops as well. I think that there were a few of those in the audio that came, but because this is part of a MOS pack, an MOS, a press pack, the interviews that have come in have already been leveled and EQ'd to a bit. So there's not really a lot playing about in terms of the quality of the sound. All the levels are done. It's pretty much just making sure there's no pops. All of the sounds, the words roll together nicely. And there's no weirdness in what they're saying.
The Mandalorian.
You can hear it, the Mandalorian, so let's look into that.
The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian.
Yeah. Better.
The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian.
Cool.
The Mandalorian is your.
These two, I'm just going to blend them quickly. They just feel a bit.
Mandalorian is you. Mandalorian is your.
Yeah. Go on.
Mandalorian is your icon.
And cuts on the middle of a breath there. So I'm going to blend it, see if that gets rid of it.
Or icon.
Or makes it worse.
Icon. Your icon.
I think what I'm actually going to do is cut to silence.
Or icon. Your iconically cool. Iconically.
Now the gain, do you hear that? Because we've been handed it and the gain has already been put on. You can hear where it goes silent, the microphone buzz. The volume increases
Iconically cool.
in the gaps. So I'm going to get rid of that, see if it sounds natural or not.
Iconically cool.
Yeah.
Iconically cool. Iconically cool. Iconically cool. Iconically cool. Flawed, mysterious loner.
Bit of a jump there.
This loner.
Yeah,
Mysterious loner. Mysterious loner. Mysterious loner. Mysterious loner.
Actually, it was pretty good how it was.
Mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and
Just so that it feels natural compared to other clips, I'm going to get rid of her breath there.
life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
That sounds good.
This little,
There's a little pop at the beginning of that.
this little,
So we're going to put a blend on. Hopefully that helps.
this little,
Yeah.
This little being,
Those two don't flow.
this little being is suddenly helping him.
There's an echo in the room that he's in.
Is suddenly helping him.
So if I cut to silence, it's going to sound weird.
The being is suddenly helping him. The being is suddenly helping him. The being is suddenly helping him.
So let's blend those two together, see if that helps.
Being is suddenly helping him. And then
And those are repeating, but hopefully if I blend them, then you won't hear the loop.
helping him. And then challenging him.
And you can hear him breathe at the end of that.
Challenging him.
Cool.
Challenging him.
That sounds okay.
Challenging him.
The show,
Challenging him.
the show to me and the show to
Yeah, she's still popping, isn't she?
the show to me. The show to me. The show to me. The show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something.
There's a breath there.
Man
Half a breath. Maybe if I blend it, then we can get full breath.
discovering about a man discovering something
Yeah.
about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's
Here.
That's a pretty sharp drop in the audio. Let's blend and see if it helps.
It was in here.
Yep.
The search was in here.
he's relatable.
And that starts quite sharply.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
Fade that just for the sake of it.
Taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars.
Yeah, and that comes in quite sharply as well. I'm gonna use keyframes on this because it's such a short amount of time before from 0 to peak. And I normally throw a default transition, a dissolve, fade, if I've got more than a frame, because of course audio doesn't work in frames, so you can have audio come in at half a frame, and at that point a dissolve isn't going to help. That's when it's best to use keyframes to play with these.
I think Star Wars. I think Star. I think Star. I think Star. I think Star Wars.
Smooth that. See if we get anything.
I think Star Wars is such. I think Star Wars.
Bit better.
I think Star Wars is such a.
All right, let's go with that.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was
That sounds like it's fading out. So let's see to that.
People's lives.
Yeah, still not happy with that. So to delete that, I'm going to do it with keyframes instead. It just gives me a bit more precision.
People's lives. 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 People's lives. People's lives.
it was
lives.
It was.
You know, when you listen to something so many times, you can't tell the difference. It just all sounds the same.
Part of people's lives.
It was.
let's draw this out a bit more.
Lives. People's lives.
It was
Lives. People's lives.
It was beyond being.
I wonder if I bring in some of the atmos from this guy, if it's going to help the blend.
People's lives.
It was beyond.
So, first of all, let's see what audio we have before it. Okay, we've got 5 frames of Atmos sound from the room, which I think is going to help us if we fade those. 5 up to there.
People's lives.
It was.
No, I'm not quite happy with that. So what I'm going to do, bring it down, bring it out to there, maybe fade it in over a couple of frames.
People's lives.
It was beyond.
And I think that sounds better.
People's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking. Star Wars was. It was pretty.
So now we need to do the same for this other clip.
Star Wars was. It was. Star Wars was. It was pretty.
I wonder if we have it on this clip. Yeah? Looks like it anyway.
Star Wars was. It was pretty.
Just going to fade it a frame so that it feels a bit more natural.
Star Wars was. It was pretty. Groundbreaking. Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only. Phenomenal. Not only what. Not only.
Okay, we don't have what we want here, so I need to find some room tone to put in this gap.
Was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it.
So, pretty big gap there. Let's take that.
So it was. It was. So. Pretty phenomenal. Not only.
That track is muted, so that's not going to work.
Pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was.
Cool.
It was pretty phenomenal. Not only.
But that needs to blend because you can hear the cut.
Pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
And you can hear him breathe in at the end of that. So let's cut that short, fade out because there's a lot of room noise.
It has become. It has become. But what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it.
Yeah, that sounds okay.
This new technology brings.
You could get rid of that.
This new.
You could try it.
This new technology brings filmmaking back.
Yeah, it sounds better.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. It should be.
What does he say after that?
It should be.
I'm just wondering if I can get some room tone in there, but or even if it's worth it.
It should be.
Yeah, it's very buzzy, but do I have room tone from him? Not really.
You can pick up a camera on your shoulder and do some sort of a choreography between your actors. and the parallaxes of the background will be organized. You see the set, and the actors see the set, and they sense it, and they feel it. And this is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
There's a little bit at the end there. I'll take it. Oh, shit. No, not that. What's the time code? Okay, go back into this. Drop the time code. And hopefully we've got what we need.
Where it has been and where it should be.
Just feels a bit more natural.
Should be. This is.
It's more of a fade there. So I'm now going to duplicate this and use it to bring in the next clip.
This is.
Blend the two together. Hopefully it sounds a bit more natural.
This is.
It's not quite working because the audio levels on this drops here. So I'm going to slip it a couple of frames, chop off the front here.
This is.
Comes in a bit too suddenly now, so
This is fantastic.
that's much better. These two need to dissolve.
This is fantastic. Film.
Okay, and we need a bit of Atmos here.
Film.
Don't need that fade.
Filmmaking.
It's strange that all these interviews are in different places at different times. They've got different sound qualities to each of them. So I'm just going to fill in room tone on this interview and the ones that I've done, because there's a loud room tone and the cuts between the interviews, the drop in sound is quite noticeable. So this is just going to help smooth it out.
Filmmaking.
And that sounds pretty good. And the ones earlier, I think Pablo's interview, his was pretty crisp and clear. And when it drops to, in between the dialogue, let's go back there and I'll show you. In between the dialogue, it's pretty clean. So you can see it kind of drops down the level when in between his words is a fine line. It's dead. It's zero. It's nothing. And if we go down to where's he gone? Yeah, if we go to his, actually, if we click on the dead audio that we've pulled in, where it is, it's got a bit of something to it. You can see there's a tiny little dot there. And it's also evident in the audio meter in the corner. When you play it back, you got, what's that, like 42, 48 decibels of noise. And then, sorry, negative 48, negative 42. And then this, if we put in here, okay, he's breathing there. There, you hear that tone? What are we at, like minus 51? So, it makes all the difference. Pretty much anything as close to negative 60 is, well, negative 60 is dead silent.
been where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool. That sounded good. Just gonna fade that out.
Where it should be.
Okay. So I've blended all this dialogue together. I'm just going to watch it back and keep an eye on the audio meter. I think it's going to be fine because, like I said, all of these interviews, all of the dialogue came already mixed. Let's watch it back and have a look.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
So it's around about -16
Who's
now.
been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
Same.
This little being is suddenly helping him
He feels a bit
and then
quiet.
challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline
I'm going to pump him up by just a couple. Compare him to the lady before.
a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show to me in the most basic storyline is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it
Going to put Dave up a couple of decibels again. I'm still not happy with how this fades out at the end.
Part of people's lives.
it was
People's lives.
it was
Part of people's lives.
it was
People's lives.
it was beyond
Better, but I think just the way he says it isn't great.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
it was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool, all looks good to me. So let's bring the music back in. So there's a few ways you can play with the music and get the music levels working nicely. And there's a way that Adobe recently brought into Premiere, which you may or may not know, and it's Essential Sound. So when we're in this audio workspace here, whenever you select a clip, you get this panel here, and you can give certain clips properties. So this is music, so I can tell it this is music, and I can also do this as well, music, and I can also highlight this and tell it it's dialogue. Not actually going to do that, just because I don't need to touch this dialogue right yet, and I'll show you how it works very quickly. So I have this selected, it knows it's music, and what it can do is it can duck the music in and out automatically. What does that mean? That means when there's no one speaking or no other sounds, it will turn the volume up, and when there's people speaking, it will turn the volume down automatically for you. That is ducking, and you have options when you choose ducking. So let's turn it on, To duck against what? You can duck against dialogue, or just music, or just sound effects, or just ambient clips, or clips without assigned audio type. That's basically everything, right? So because I only have one type of audio in here, I only have the dialogue. I don't need to separate what is sound effects and what is dialogue. So I could, I'm just not going to. So what I'm going to do is set against all, and then I'm just going to leave everything at the default and see how it feels. Okay, so what's it done? It's given us some keyframes here. There's a sound up here, and there's a sound up here. That makes sense. It hasn't done one here, which is interesting because I do want the sound to go up there. So probably gonna adjust this sensitivity here. Let's listen to it and see how good the fades feel. The fades are quite long. So I'm going to drop this down 600. Sensitivity. Let's try 4. See how that works. Go. Very sensitive now.
The Mandalorian is your iconically
Weird.
cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been
Well, that didn't go well, did it? So let's try again. Didn't do anything. I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm clicking undo. Okay, I'm doing all that work over there. So, let's try again, see if it works. Sensitivity 4, maybe let's try 5. 600 felt about right. Is it working?
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
Okay, hasn't worked out how I wanted it to. It's a bit shit if you ask me. So I'm gonna remove all of that. Start from scratch. Undo. Just gonna do it myself because there's not a lot of clips here, and this technique works. I think if you've got a lot of dialogue, long clips. You know what I mean? Documentaries and such. So, shift and bracket. So I assume you guys know that these two brackets here, just below plus and minus, change the volume. So you can hold down shift and it does it in larger increments. I'm going to keep this up high. What's that? -1. Probably run it about -4.
Mandalorian.
That's too loud. So let's bring that down to about -21.
Is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
And I'm going to bring this down even further. 24, 25, something like that.
Mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life.
Nah, maybe 21 is better.
Loner.
And let's sort out this fade. I think I tried doing it before but gave up.
Odd, mysterious loner.
Who's
Mysterious loner.
who's been following
Odd, mysterious loner. Mysterious loner.
Almost.
Odd, mysterious loner.
Oh God, it's frustrating, isn't it?
Mysterious loner.
who's
Loner.
who's
Odd, mysterious loner.
who's been following
Maybe it's just not in sync. Let's try shifting it.
Mysterious loner. Loner.
who's
Mysterious loner.
who's
Mysterious loner. Mysterious loner.
Who-
Mysterious loner.
Who-
Loner.
who's
Loner.
who's
I'm determined to make it right. I wonder if I can slip this cut point back and have a different portion of the music around here.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
I've purposely left this music slightly loud, slightly on the loud side over this, just because it's the introduction still. We're not getting into the details and the nitty-gritty of the dialogue. We're still trying to create an atmosphere, so the music wants to feel really present in the mix.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
who's been following a way of life and has that
Cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
What about if I do a really long fade? Might sound weird.
And is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
who's been following
Sometimes if you just do a really long fade underneath some strong dialogue, you can get away with weird shit.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Absolutely not.
Is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Almost.
Iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
I think we're really honing in on listening to it right now, and the viewer isn't going to, so I don't think they're going to notice that cut. I think we'll get away with it.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
who's been following a way of life and has
And I'm going to increase the volume slightly on this as we build up to this.
Mysterious loner
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life.
Not quite as high as that. Cool. 22. Get rid of that. That one. Better.
Who's been following a way of life and
mysterious loner
Okay, it doesn't increase much.
mysterious loner
It's basically here I want it to be louder.
mysterious loner
who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
So what we got here? 15. Yeah, sounds about right.
Has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
But this guy is a bit too loud.
A way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
I'm going to drop that down a couple, bring this to come in later, and fade up a bit more.
And has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
Let's tease that out.
Upended by the introduction of the baby. And has that way of life upended.
I'm just going to up the volume of her dialogue. She's got a soft voice.
Following
To
a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him, and then
By the introduction of the baby.
this little being is suddenly helping him, and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he
going to fade that down sooner.
has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him, and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search
So this music goes up here, so
was in here.
I'm going to split it here.
he's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know.
That's quite a nice level. I'm going to bring this up by a couple of decibels.
Challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that
Couple
the
more.
search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable.
And then fade that. I just find this this way a lot easier than using keyframes for big chunks, because it's easy to, you know, shift these around and the fade, you know, just drag and drop, as opposed to grabbing each individual point.
Him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our.
He had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of
Nice.
covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I'm just going to bring it up
I
here.
think Star
Uh, see how easy, how much quicker that was than putting keyframes.
Taking that
And then bring that up. 3, 4.
armor off, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off. Taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is
I'm going to drop this down a touch. Just 2 decibels.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
this new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
So what have we got? Minus 26 here. Let's bring this down to minus 26. And then bring the volume up gradually to the end. And we'll go minus 12.
Fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Bring that in a little easier.
Making back where it should be.
Not like that.
This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool.
Filmmaking back where it should be.
All right, let's watch it back.
The Mandalorian is your icon.
Music's a bit loud when he first talks.
The Mandalorian is your iconically cool, flawed, mysterious loner.
Who's been following a way of life and has that way of life upended by the introduction of the baby.
This little being is suddenly helping him and then challenging him.
The show, to me, in the most basic storyline, is about a man discovering something about himself that he had never known.
And realizing that the search wasn't out there, the search was in here.
He's relatable. We're all kind of covered in our own armor, you know, and terrified of taking that armor off.
I think Star Wars is such a part of people's lives.
It was beyond being groundbreaking, Star Wars was. It was pretty phenomenal. Not only what it was at the time, but what it has become.
This new technology brings filmmaking back where it has been and where it should be. This is fantastic. Filmmaking back where it should be.
Cool. I'm pretty happy with that. I hope you guys are too. So next. The next thing on the card, assuming now I've handed this over to the producer, they've thanked me, covered me in champagne and told me that they're going to buy me a house, then we need to go make the titles. So assuming all of these guys are going to have little lower thirds saying their name and their role, and I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of title card or Mandalorian logo. Perhaps there's almost definitely going to be a call to action at the end. logo, website, whatever. So what I'm going to do is do all of that in After Effects next time. So now that we have the sequence all here, if anybody wants a copy of this Premiere project, so they can see all of my projects, right? All of my sequences, everything, how it's worked out, because obviously you can download the footage and make your own edit. So if you like to get a hold of these projects, this particular Premiere project, and let me know in the comments. If I get enough people, I'll put it online for you guys to download and have a look around and see how I've done it, and figure some things out for yourself. What I might do next week, possibly, is add in some sound effects. I think that this opening sequence could really use some sound effects to heighten it. Trouble is, the sound effects that we need are going to be very specific to Star Wars. So I don't think we're going to be able to get a hold of them. They are going to be, you know, the hover bikes, and the and the guns. They're not. They're going to be proprietary to Star Wars. I doubt very much I'll be able to get hold of any of those. If I do, I'll throw them in next week. But next week I want to concentrate on the titles and just basically putting the finishing touches on this so that it's ready for delivery. We've got the picture in order, we've got the audio in order. It's literally just the titles now. If you have found this interesting, then I've got loads more tips and tricks on my weekly email list. So there's a link down in the description. Join me and loads of other editors, and I'll be emailing you on a weekly basis with random shit that's happened in my life that's funny, about editing, and also tips and tricks. So far, people have been pretty positive about the list and what's going on. So come join, come say hi. There's loads of really exciting stuff on there, and I've got loads of training that's only available to people on my on the email list. So thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to tune in next week. I'll be here, same place, same time, and we're going to be working on the titles in After Effects, and I'll be working through my entire After Effects workflow. And if there's enough, I'll start again. And if there's enough interest in the After Effects project, then I'll put the After Effects project up online as well. Let me know in the comments. All right, thanks very much. And if you have any feedback, I'm going to put this edit up and let me know. I'll put the link in the description. Okay, cheers guys.